Through 20 years patrolling these waters, Coast Guard officer Greg Watt thought he'd seen it all. Debris from shipwrecks, abandoned fishing nets, the occasional wayward yacht, but nothing had prepared him for what emerged from the Atlantic fog that morning. The shape cutting through the mist defied explanation, drifting with purpose toward the Irish coastline like a ghost ship from another world. The Irish coastline is like heaven for tourists, with its breathtaking cliffs, rolling green hills, and incredible views of the Atlantic Ocean. But on one chilly morning, both tourists and local people were shocked when they saw what looked like a completely alien ship floating near the Mayo County coastline. They had no clue that it was carrying a mysterious message. All the people who came to watch and stare from the beach quickly figured out which way the strange object was going as it bounced up and down with the waves. Soon, it was clear that the weird boat was just drifting wherever the water took it. The people watching decided it was time to call the cops and the Coast Guard. That morning, when Greg Watt received the strange phone call, he was working his shift. He rushed to the spot as soon as he spotted the puzzling object moving through the mist far away. Whatever this thing was, it was huge as it came closer. But when he got a better look, he was amazed by what he found. It was definitely some kind of boat. All he could pray for was that nobody was inside. "I've never seen anything like this in 20 years on the job," Greg muttered to his partner as they approached. The Coast Guard team thought something was wrong as they got nearer. The strange thing seemed like it had no reason to be in the water, especially not in the middle of the ocean, and it didn't look like any boat they'd ever seen before. But why was it here? Was anyone on board? Greg pulled up next to the object and shouted through his megaphone, but when nobody answered, he couldn't shake the bad feeling that washed over him. Greg and his team were greeted with complete silence. They climbed aboard and got ready for whatever they might find inside. After several nervous minutes, though, what they discovered left them with more questions than answers. There was no time to waste. The wind started picking up, creating waves that could have wrecked the whole vessel. After connecting their boat to this unusual ocean find, the Irish Coast Guard carefully towed it back to shore. Now they could investigate the mystery more carefully since they were safely on land. The boat looked like someone had been living in it. Greg felt chills run down his back as he wondered what might have happened to the boat's strangely missing crew. Where were the people who had been on this odd boat, and why had they been crossing the ocean in such a weirdly shaped vessel? "This thing looks more like a camping trailer than a boat," one of the Coast Guard officers said, shaking his head in disbelief. Everyone who saw the craft was surprised it had managed to stay floating at all, since it looked more like a mobile home than a boat. The makeshift vessel was constructed from driftwood and had sheets of polystyrene attached to the hull to help it float. The wooden exterior was painted with thick black tar to weatherproof the boat. Looking back, Greg admitted it was the strangest thing he had ever come across, until he found the quickly written note inside. "Because it's so big, the shape itself is really unusual," Greg explained to reporters later. "At first, I thought it might be a trailer, but the boat was actually livable," he added. A new clue led the investigators straight to the answer. A name written in black permanent marker on the inside wall. Rick Small, a person from Thunder Bay, Ontario, was famous in his town, and even though he lived on the other side of the world, his adventures were about to surprise the people of Mayo County, a quiet beach town. You see, Rick was thought to be pretty strange and had a very different way of looking at the world. Greg wanted to solve this puzzle, so he did some research on Rick Small. He searched everywhere for any information about the man, and when his investigation took him all the way to Canada, he was more than interested. It turned out that Rick had always supported clean energy and spoke out loudly about environmental problems. Rick had become famous for an incredible journey across Canada on a unique solar-powered bicycle he called Light Dragon. This three-wheeled bike was equipped with 6 solar panels that powered a 48-volt system with a 500-watt motor and 600 watts of solar energy. The journey took him 114 days to complete, covering 7,000 kilometers at an average speed of 27 kilometers per hour. It has a 500-watt motor, Rick had told CBC during his famous ride. It's a 48-volt system, and I have 600 watts of solar panels, and that's what I'm traveling across the country with. The solar panels allowed Rick to cook, heat, light, and power his tricycle completely off the grid. He could recharge while riding, when braking, when stopping to pick up litter, or while talking to curious locals. "It's been a blast. It's been really easy," Rick had said during his journey. "The hard days are cloudy days when it starts to rain and stuff, so I'll have to pull over and set up camp for the day." His next big project was building a completely self-sufficient boat that he planned to live on in the waters near Foxtrot Marina in Newfoundland. But Rick's dreams for his floating home were even bigger and more ambitious than anyone realized. Rick wanted to sail his houseboat as well as live on it, but his plans kept changing. He told different people different things about his ultimate destination. To some, he said he wanted to sail his ship from Newfoundland through the Gulf of Alaska. To others, he claimed he wanted to take it across the Atlantic to prove that solar power could make the journey. Eventually, he settled on a plan to sail from Newfoundland around the Arctic to show that the ice was disappearing due to climate change. He began by building the strange 20-foot boat out of scrap materials, driftwood, and plywood. The boat looked more like a camper than a seaworthy vessel, complete with solar panels bolted to the roof. But the construction was incredibly improvised and unstable. Timothy John Ewart, a local sailor in Conception Bay, first saw the craft in September 2015. "The boat was beached there by my road," Ewart recalled. "I do a lot of sailing myself, and I thought, I've got to talk to this guy because I've never seen anything like it." When Ewart spoke with Rick, he quickly realized how unprepared the vessel was for ocean travel. The boat's steering system was only a piece of plywood bolted to a PVC pipe, Ewart told the BBC later. The motors barely had enough power to move the boat. Rick was living on the boat while he worked on it, treating it as his home. During their conversation, Rick made comments about the number of gas-burning engines around and his environmental concerns. "I asked him what his plan was," Ewart said. "He said he wanted to take it across the Atlantic. He wanted to prove that solar power can do it." But could his one-of-a-kind ship withstand the Atlantic Ocean's powerful waves? Ewart, an experienced sailor who had completed 5 transatlantic voyages himself, was skeptical. You could tell that he put his knowledge into it. But when you have an idea in your head, sometimes it doesn't always come to fruition, especially when you're dealing with something like the North Atlantic because it's not something you can control, Ewart explained. Of course, the Canadian Coast Guard was worried when Rick called them and told them his plan. "Sir, we strongly advise against this journey," the Coast Guard officer told Rick over the phone. "Your vessel isn't designed for ocean crossing." They warned Rick not to make the trip because they were afraid his houseboat wouldn't make it. The authorities managed to discourage him from attempting the dangerous crossing, but Rick was determined to test his creation. Rick only managed to get about 20 kilometers up the Newfoundland coast before reality set in. "I saw him on the bay his first day out," reported local resident Ted Perrin on Facebook. "Flat calm, no seas at all. The next day or so after we had northeast winds, which are bad here. Guess he found out quickly that the North Atlantic is no joke." When Rick left the area, witnesses saw him standing on top of the boat using a long piece of 2x4 wood to push his way out because the current was stopping the boat from moving properly. The makeshift steering system and weak motors proved completely inadequate for real ocean conditions. After his failed attempt, the boat ended up tied to a dock in Portugal Cove, St. Phillips, about 30 minutes north of where Rick had started. But the boat had become an eyesore, and Rick was eventually forced to move it from Foxtrap Marina. Where was Rick, though? The first thing the authorities worried about was that Rick had drowned at sea, or something even worse had happened. But the truth was quite different. Sorry for the interruption. Before we continue with the story, I kindly ask you to like the video and subscribe to this channel. It is very important for us. Thank you very much. Something major must have changed his plans, said Rodney Mercer, a member of Foxtrap Marina. He knew exactly what he wanted to do and what he was building. Finding it floating out there with that note really shocked me. Instead of attempting the dangerous crossing himself, Rick had apparently abandoned his dream and left behind a message that would touch hearts around the world. The message read, "I, Rick Small, give this structure to a young person who doesn't have a home, so they can have a better life that Newfoundlanders choose not to do. No rent, no mortgage, no electricity bills." The boat's last known location in Canada was Portugal Cove, St. Phillips in late September 2016. But instead of becoming a shelter for homeless youth as Rick intended, the boat apparently broke free from its moorings and was cast adrift into the unforgiving Atlantic. The incredible journey across the ocean took less than 45 days. The unmanned vessel traveled approximately 3,100 kilometers across the North Atlantic at an average speed of about 69 kilometers per day, roughly the speed of a slow walk. Due to eastward-moving Atlantic currents, the craft drifted toward northern Europe, eventually washing up on the Irish coast. Soon, crowds of people were coming to the coast to see Rick's amazing boat for themselves. The authorities eventually had to remove it from the coast because so many people gathered around it. Irish officials put it in storage, hoping that Rick would come to collect it. But Rick Small's location remained unknown for 3 years. After his solar-powered houseboat was pulled onto the Irish coast of Mayo County, nobody had seen Rick Small since the boat disappeared from the Canadian harbor. This must have happened because of a significant change, Rodney Mercer reflected. He had a clear idea what he was building and what he wanted to do. Surprised to see it set adrift with that note. Something must have changed drastically for this to happen. Local people said many wondered if he had actually been on the boat when it sailed across the Atlantic, even though he sometimes disappeared to live alone in nature. The mystery deepened when Rick couldn't be reached for comment about his boat's incredible journey. The boat itself told the story of its voyage. Coast Guard officers were amazed to find 2 kettles still inside the vessel, the same kettles that had been photographed during Rick's cross-Canada solar bicycle journey. You've got to give him credit, because if she did roll or flip over, then those kettles wouldn't be there anymore, Ewart observed. I'm generally surprised that it made it, and that it made it in most of its pieces. In Ireland, Rick Small's houseboat got so much attention that several companies wanted to make it an official local landmark. Also, the story of how the houseboat arrived in Ireland and the man who built it became famous because it was an unselfish gift to the town's homeless people. The mystery was finally solved 3 years later when a Canadian journalist, Adam Sawatsky, encountered Rick by chance on Vancouver Island. "I stopped to talk with Rick because of the remarkable solar vehicle he was riding," Sawatsky said on Twitter. "I never expected to hear his connection to an international marine mystery." Rick, now 62 years old, told CTV News that he was surprised to see his boat had made it to Ireland relatively intact. He confirmed that when he couldn't find the right motor to assist with his Arctic voyage, he had given the boat away, though he claimed not to know how it ended up crossing the Atlantic. Rick's message was simple and clear. The boat had somehow drifted almost 12,500 miles from the Canadian island of Newfoundland to the Irish shore near County Mayo. Rick Small's creative vessel had two goals: to get others to think about solar power as a real alternative to fossil fuels, and to provide shelter for someone in need. Strange things sometimes wash up on Ireland's beaches, but Rick Small's solar-powered houseboat was unlike anything the Coast Guards on duty and the local people had ever seen. The boat was eventually restored by local volunteers and community groups. It now sits on display at a community sensory garden in nearby Binghamstown, where it's known as the Solar Ark, a lasting monument to one man's environmental vision and generous spirit. In all my years working these waters, I've never encountered anything quite like this, Greg reflected months later. It wasn't just the boat itself, but the story behind it, the dedication, the dreams, and ultimately the gift to help others. We believe that Rick's amazing determination and the spirit of his gift will last for many years to come, wherever he might be. His houseboat, now safely displayed on the shores of Ireland, stands as a testament to the power of human creativity, environmental consciousness, and the enduring message of hope that can transcend oceans, borders, and time itself. Did you enjoy this story? If you had to give away something you worked hard to build, what would you want it to become? Let us know in the comments below. If you liked the story, subscribe to this channel and leave a like. Sometimes letting go of our dreams creates something even more beautiful. Hope for others. Thanks so much for listening. See you in the next video. Have a great day.